Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of All Access AM. Happy Monday. I'm Billy Embody. Appreciate you guys being here with us as we have a packed show for you guys on this Monday morning. So I hope you guys enjoy it because this is the time of year where things are going to get crazy across college basketball with coaching changes, the NCAA tournament, that final push to join March Madness and more. We'll do it all on this edition of All Access AM on this Monday. So appreciate you guys tuning in with us. All of you guys who are so active in the chat, thank you. And we're looking forward to bringing you guys a fun show. We've got two great guests for you guys today, two of the best in what they do. Joe Tipton of On3 and Rivals.com joins us at 9:10 a.m. Eastern time to talk coaching changes in the ACC. Already two firings. Are there more on the way? We'll also be joined, of course, by our friend James Fletcher. We'll talk the weekend action in the ACC, where everything stands for bracketology in March Madness for college basketball, heading into conference championship week for the kind of the rest of college basketball. We've seen some auto bids already punched, and we've seen some conference champions already crowned over the last week. Now we get into the final push where you get the bid stealers. You get those teams that are just maybe on the cusp of what we don't know it yet, but will eventually become a Cinderella story as March Madness unfolds. And we have a lot to get to as far as reviewing the weekend action, what it means for bracketology in the ACC and more. Some bubble teams surfacing in this conference that are really making the case in some cases of why they should be in, and others kind of maybe backing their way in. We're looking at SMU, for example. Are they going to be able to hang on and still make it in? There are some other schools that are certainly able to stay on the bracket, on the bubble, because of some of those changes over the last kind of couple of weeks where teams are losing and nobody seems to actually want in for March Madness. So we'll talk about all of that on All Access AM this morning. Appreciate you guys being here. We also appreciate our friends at Security National Bank. Security National Bank, our Monday sponsor, makes sure that you can rest easy when it comes to your personal and business banking or whatever they are managing for you and helping you navigate. Security National Bank can help you through all of that. And that's because they take great care to treat everybody like family and treat people like you would want to be treated when you're just handing over your money, so to speak, and allowing somebody to be the custodian of that money for you and keep it safe and sound. Well, you give them a call at 402-344-7300 anytime this week. And even on Saturday, if you want to catch them on a Saturday morning, you can give them a call and see what they can do for you. We are proud to bank with them on our business side of things. So we appreciate what they do for us here at All Access AM and continue to help us in everything that we do. And we want you guys to check them out because they're such a great bank. They make you feel like family, and that's what's important too. So appreciate our friends at Security National Bank. Go to securitynational.bank to find out more on what they can do for you. So appreciate them as we kick off the show on this Monday. Lots to talk about as the weekend has unfolded. We've seen the firings now across the ACC start to unfold, and we'll get to that in just a few minutes here with Joe Tipton. But certainly, I think the ACC, maybe this season, this offseason, is going to show that, hey, they're ready for some of these other teams to make those moves. Maybe we're not looking at Wake Forest in that respect. They're keeping Steve Forbes. You can certainly argue that they might not have it all together when it comes to figuring out the best way to attack the new world of NIL and how they need to still get their ducks in a row and all of those things. But at the end of the day, that Wake Forest program, it just isn't there yet. And so they're still trying to navigate that as they see the new success of football. So I kind of get where they're at. But when you look at the two openings now with Boston College and Georgia Tech, they're kind of on two opposite ends of the spectrum. And we'll get into that with Joe Tipton here in just a minute, so I want to not steal any of his thunder. But when you look at this league and having two jobs open already in Boston College and Georgia Tech, maybe Pitt opens. We mentioned that Wake is going to keep Steve Forbes, but where's the next domino to fall? Is there another domino that we're going to see unfold and see changes come to their program? And that's where it's going to be really interesting to watch, because we're following a conference here on this show that, you see a Syracuse, you see some of the other programs that have fallen behind, and they can make a move and they can hire the right person to lead that move, and they can elevate themselves right back up to the top. They really can. In today's day and age of college basketball, there's multiple ways to build a program, but you're also looking at programs that can be turned around quickly in a sense. Look at what Jay Lucas has done in year one. I mean, just a phenomenal job by him to assemble a roster that he felt would be competitive within the league. And you look at what Will Wade did, and I know NC State has certainly fallen off, but you still look at what what they did as far as being in the top half of the league, and you see what UNC did, just kind of doubling down and revitalizing their team with the right pieces, and throwing more money at Hubert Davis's roster to make it work. And you feel so bad for Caleb Wilson, which the news came out this weekend that he's going to be out the rest of the season. But man, the ACC in basketball is obviously always going to be one of those leagues that it spends. But I think this offseason is the one where we're seeing some of those other programs that are fully capable of being among the top in the league. We're going to see them double down. And I've got some thoughts on Georgia Tech and what that job could be, and what Ryan Alpert, the AD there, who's still relatively fresh on the job there, can do. But I have full faith that he's going to make a good hire. I've been very impressed with what they do. There are some jobs that have the opportunity to take that next jump up. And this is a critical offseason for the league. We saw the league elevate itself with some of that additional funding and money that we talked about and mentioned for these rosters, for these coaches. And now you're going to get back into that, and you're going to see a lot of teams take their latest stab at that and take a stab at it with new coaches. There's really, when you look up and down the league, there's not many teams that I think we're sitting here saying, okay, this team is retaining their coach. They're going to throw a bunch more money at the problem and fix it. Like, there really aren't many teams that need to say that and do that. Like Cal and Stanford, you could make the argument, okay, they kind of hung around the bubble-ish. Is that something where they need to throw more money at it, or is it just a part of building a better roster for this league, kind of where SMU is as well? Do you just throw more money at it, or is it an appropriate amount already? It's going to be fascinating to see some of these teams double down and invest on where they need to be at in NIL and roster building and all of those things. But one man who knows all the inside scoop around college basketball is our friend Joe Tipton of On3 and Rivals.com. And he joins us now on All Access AM. We're really pumped that he can start off his Monday with us. Joe, welcome in. Thanks for doing this.
Absolutely, Billy. Appreciate you having me, man.
Of course. And give everybody the lay of the land about this time of year for you in college basketball. Is it still relatively quiet, that little calm before the transfer portal storm, and it's just coaching changes, or are you seeing it all start to take off?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a talk around, guys that are going to be going into the portal. Agents are reaching out saying, hey, here's my client list. Hey, here's who's going to be transferring at the end of the season. Not really putting out too many of those players right now. The primary focus is on the carousel, and that'll even turn up even more, player movement in the portal. But right now, just conference tournaments, and eventually the NCAA tournament, and then carousel mainly.
And speaking of the carousel, it got going for the ACC over the weekend with Boston College firing Earl Grant and Georgia Tech parting ways with Damon Stoudamire. Let's start with Boston College. And the reason why I start there is I think they're almost now a hot button kind of program in the ACC, not just in basketball, but in football. It just seems like they have to find a way to get ducks in a row with the new age of NIL and spending and all of those things. And, it seems like that's something that is going to be a key focus for making this hire is how do you energize this program? How do you energize the supporters to, throw down for BC to be competitive in this league? And they're going to be doing it with a new head coach now.
Yeah, it makes it really difficult because, in all honesty, Boston College, at least to me, it feels like they're in the wrong conference. It doesn't feel like they should be in a power conference like the ACC. And I think when college coaches are looking, they're interviewing candidates to fill the BC opening, one of the first questions that comes up is what's the NIL, what's the financial support? And to be honest with you, I don't think it's very good. So it's an automatic deterrent from a lot of coaches when looking at some of these jobs. It doesn't even have to be BC specific. But that's their primary, one of the things that they're looking for. And if you don't have that, it's going to make it really tough to win games and acquire talent. So it's one of those jobs that BC is one of the, least coveted jobs in the league, just kind of for obvious reasons. But it's just going to take the right guy that maybe can be operating with a little bit of a lower budget that has a knack for evaluating maybe under the radar talent, not the the 5-star level guys and not the hottest guys in the transfer portal, but more so of those under the radar, underrated guys to be able to rebuild that program. And hopefully, somebody's going to be able to make that happen.
Earl Grant departs after 5 seasons, 72 and 92. And look, I mean, BC hockey is up a peg over men's basketball. Truly, there. That's just kind of how it rolls up there in Chestnut Hill. And when you see some of the names that are early on, maybe being floated, do any of those maybe fit what you see as far as the need for an evaluator, somebody who does less with more, finds the diamonds in the rough in recruiting or the transfer portal and can make some of this work?
Yeah, I think two names that come to mind are Joe Gallo at Merrimack, and obviously they transitioned from D2 to Division One. So when you're evaluating players like that, all those guys are D2 guys are going to be under the radar. So I think he would be a good fit. He's been a proven winner, in the area, and then also James Jones at Yale, Ivy League, being able to recruit just a very small niche of players. I think both of those coaches have had success, and then also have been able to, acquire talent that's kind of like I mentioned, that under the radar, undervalued, not the type of players that, Power 5 conferences, those type of teams are going after.
Is it a job that you go in there and whoever gets it, and maybe it's one of the guys you mentioned, maybe it's not, that you have to be unique and as far as how you structure your staff? Like, do you have to hire a GM that is, locked in on scouting every nook and cranny in this country and beyond for talent? Or is it, you kind of don't change what you're doing as far as if you're a, do more with less type of guy? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it really depends on, the head coach that they decide to bring in. I think if you have the resources to be able to bring in a general manager and somebody that has ties to the area and that has an eye and a knack for talent evaluation, I think that's the biggest piece for Boston College, because like I said, they're not going to land, the 5-star level recruit. They're not going to land, many even like 4-star recruits in high school. And to be very frank, it's a difficult place to recruit to because of their lack of winning over the last however many years. So you have to get the guy, that maybe those other schools in the ACC don't want, or other power conferences teams don't necessarily want. So you have to get those lower tier guys that you believe can develop into star players to be able to slowly turn that program around.
Let's go over a little down the ACC to Georgia Tech. They make a change. Look, when Damon Stoudamire was hired, this seemed like a hire that probably just wasn't going to work. And a lot of people had some opinions on that. But, it takes a minute and things get fleshed out. And eventually he does get let go. what was your take on, just the job he did, and certainly the decision to move on with a new AD and Ryan Alpert there, who's going to very clearly make his mark on the basketball side of things. He's been critical in putting the pieces together facility wise and fundraising wise, and the football team's been successful. This seems like a job that could be a little bit of a sleeping giant in a sense.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you're obviously in the heart of Atlanta there, a lot of talent in the state and in the city. I think it comes back to it's similar to maybe a point I should have made with BC. You don't necessarily, I don't want to necessarily make excuses for some of these coaches, but at the same time, lack of funding can either funding in general when it comes to NIL can make or break a job, and some coaches can excel with very limited funding. And we've, seen coaches be able to do that. But at the same time, and also on the other side of the coin, we've seen coaches with plenty of NIL also crash and burn. But I think that's one of the things that you're going to have to need to be able to acquire talent in this day and age. But I think, if you find the right person, for the Georgia Tech job, it's also, to a lesser degree, it's not necessarily similar to Boston College, but also it's if you're a kid, in the state of Georgia or in the Southeast region, you want to go to a school like Auburn or Alabama or even maybe UGA, or if you're, in the ACC, if you're being recruited by ACC programs, you want to go to, Duke or Virginia or North Carolina or maybe even Miami now, right? Like schools like that. So I think Georgia Tech is also a school that you might be able to land, if you recruit at a really hard level, be able to land some of those top guys within the state. But also you probably also need to recruit those guys that are more so the developmental guys. And then also you're able to kind of take a chance on and then believe in the longevity of their career and being able to retain them. I think that's such an important piece to college basketball, is being able to get those guys back and not have to lose them year after year. But you also have to have the NIL support to be able to bring them back, because other schools are going to offer them more money.
And off that, is there early buzz on, and I know BC is a job that just at face value is going to struggle with this and this reputation. Is there a early buzz around Georgia Tech kind of making that job more attractive and saying, hey, look at what we're doing as far as fundraising for facilities. We're going to do that for basketball and kind of get it on a good footing where you can make an impact with maybe some of those recruits that are right in your backyard in Atlanta.
Yeah, I do think they plan to increase their NIL support, which is, on par for every job that opens. You almost always increase your NIL support to encourage players and then also the coach to be able to take the job. So I do think that is a plan for them, but I don't think they're going to be competing with some of the upper tier ACC programs in terms of funding. I still think they're going to be, middle of the pack or even that, lower half of the league, just in terms of overall support, unless you can get a big time donor to rally behind a head coach that they really believe in or maybe have a relationship with. I think that would also be a smart play, because I don't think fans think about it enough. The donor support is massive. They have to have a great relationship either with the administration or the head coach, the general manager. Those people can take you a long way.
And any early names that catch your eye at Georgia Tech?
Yeah, I think the two that come to mind early, and I think they're actually going to make, I say early, but I think they're going to make a decision probably, around a week or so. They're going to move pretty quickly here to get a head start on the portal and get everything established there. But the two that come to mind are Scott Cross at Troy and Casey Alexander at Belmont. And I would say Cross is probably the leading candidate as of right now, for the job. So that, there's some ties there with the administration, and the deputy AD at Georgia Tech was previously at Troy and brought Scott Cross in, and then Casey Alexander is another guy who has had success at Belmont. Led them to 7 straight 20-win seasons. He's a Nashville native, so somewhat local there. But I think those are the two that are kind of out front right now for the Georgia Tech opening.
Scott Cross, probably my first, maybe second interview ever as a young college reporter. When he was back at UTA, they were kind of still getting things off the ground when he had just been named head coach there. Just gracious with his time, let me in his program, and I'll always remember that good guy. And look, I mean, covering SMU, I mean, down the road, Andy Enfield, eventually moves on, and he's a guy that spent almost 20 years, it feels like, in the DFW area, but very much a candidate now for a high major job in Georgia Tech. I think he'd be a phenomenal choice. You mentioned Casey Alexander. You can't really argue with the success that he's had either. Do you see a strong coaching carousel of candidates this offseason as a whole? Like, is this a good year to be in the market for a head coach?
Honestly, not really. No, not unless we see a surprise retirement from a Bill Self or a Rick Barnes or a Tom Izzo. And I don't know if any of those are, guys are 100% going to retire. You always kind of look at those guys when they get a little bit older in their career. But I think overall, a lot of the jobs that are open or that are projected to open, I don't think that they're going to be super highly coveted. It's going to be hard to get a sitting high major head coach for a lot of these replacements. They're going to dip down into, the mid-major level to pick off some of those coaches. But even a guy like Josh Schertz at St. Louis, who's had a ton of success there, he's being very selective. He's probably the most coveted mid-major head coach out there right now. And, he's probably had plenty of interest from some of these high majors that are currently open and then also, plan to be open. But, I think, he's okay with staying at SLU for another year. They've rallied behind him and given him, once again, a lot of financial support to be able to bring in talent and retain those guys from those high major schools, kind of chomping at the bit for some of his players. But it's one of those cycles where it's, it could get crazy. You can't rule anything out. Like, the domino effect is real, with just how things, open with, SMU having a surprise opening in infield, jumping over from USC and Eric Musselman replacing him, in Southern Cal, and then John Calipari, jumping to Arkansas to replace Muss. I don't know if it's going to be one of those years, but it'll still be pretty entertaining.
You mentioned the Andy Enfield kind of domino that started everything when Rob Lanier was let go, and that crazy coaching carousel last offseason. Your take from what you've been able to see on SMU, obviously down the stretch here without BJ Edwards, they've struggled. They've basically fallen apart. But what's your take on what Andy Enfield and this staff are doing at SMU, and got a couple years now under their belt?
Yeah, I've actually been really impressed with them. I know it kind of, fell apart here towards the end of the season without BJ losing, a handful of games in a row. But overall, them, you think about them joining, from the American to the ACC, and the ACC is much improved this year. Last season not so much, but Virginia, Miami. So I really like what they've been able to do. I think they've recruited at a really high level. I think they've, made themselves more of an attractive destination for potential players. And they've been able to develop a lot of guys and had success within the program, via transfer. And now, like I said, recruiting some of those, in-state, high school players that I think they project to have success long-term. But I think it's a tougher job in the ACC. But I think overall they've done a good job.
I'll get you out of here on this, and just kind of a look at the ACC as a whole. I mean, Duke, obviously the class of the conference, the whole league has seen a resurgence this year. What were your impressions kind of going into the season of the ACC, and have they exceeded them? Have they hit their markers as far as a league as a whole and heading into March Madness?
Yeah, it's been interesting to see, because I think we all, projected, Duke to be at one of the top teams, in the league, but then also in the country, of course. But like I said, Virginia has taken a huge step with Ryan Odom. They're playing a way different style of basketball compared to with Tony Bennett, and they're much more entertaining to watch, at least in my opinion. And Jay Lucas has surprised me at Miami as well. I think he's done a great job his first year being a head coach down in Coral Gables. And I think Louisville is kind of one of those schools that has been one of the more disappointing, relative to what expectations were coming into the season with their portal class. I know Mikal Brown's, missed, quite a few games with a back injury. And I think Florida State is another team that I was thinking about earlier today that's ahead of schedule. If I'm not mistaken, I think they were picked last in the preseason poll, or very much so towards the bottom, and they finished right there, kind of in the middle. So I think those are a few of the teams that stand out to me.
Yeah, I think the job that Luke Laux has done there at FSU is really impressive down the stretch. And they were right there at the bottom, Boston College, sitting down there as one of the preseason bottom feeder. But this league's been a lot of fun to watch, and it's been a lot of fun catching up with you, Joe Tipton. We appreciate all the work you do at On3 and Rivals. Make sure you guys give him a follow on Twitter, Instagram, wherever. The news breaking season is upon us. It's time to put Joe Tipton on alerts if you don't already.
Appreciate it, Billy. Thanks so much, man.
Yeah, there he goes. Joe Tipton, really appreciate him joining us on All Access AM. Just one of the all-time dudes in this industry. So appreciate him, and hope you guys enjoyed our catching up with Joe Tipton. And we appreciate our supporters, our sponsors here at All Access AM as we await James Fletcher with some bracketology. Do want to remind you guys about our friends at Corporate Magic. And Corporate Magic is where, if you're a brand and you are looking to put on a memorable, almost life-changing event, you need to go to corporatemagic.com. You need to see some of the events that they've done. You need to see what they've been able to put together throughout their company's history, with concerts, with national sales meetings, with global productions that take a team with expertise, with experience in planning and developing that plan and executing it at a high level. You need to find that. And Corporate Magic, there's no better place to get that than with our friends at Corporate Magic. So visit corporatemagic.com and tell them All Access AM sent you, and they'll be sure to get you lined up with all the right people to talk to about your next event or experience. All right. James Fletcher going to join us here in just a moment on All Access AM. Happy to have him with us to talk bracketology. It is that time of the year where ACC basketball tournament getting going this week. We will review some of the games from this past weekend. But just so you guys know, of course, here's your Tuesday slate for the ACC tournament. Pitt, Stanford in the 1 o'clock game on ACC Network. These are Central Time games. Then you'll have that Pitt Stanford game is the 10-15 matchup, with Stanford sitting as a 10 seed in the tournament. Then you have Syracuse facing off against SMU, 3:30 p.m. Central on ACC Network. That is the 11-14 matchup. And then Wake Forest, Virginia Tech, 6 p.m. Central on ACC Network. A big opportunity for Virginia Tech to make a move late, maybe find a way to go on a run and do something miraculous, but unlikely with where they are as a whole. And for SMU, you look at that team and they've got to find a way. They have to find a way to win this one game in the ACC tournament. Then they'd face Louisville in the second round. And if they can figure out how to get past the Cardinals, maybe that would be enough to get them feeling good again about the NCAA tournament. But as it stands, SMU, one of those teams sitting as the last four in, wherever you look. And we'll get into that with James Fletcher and what some of the implications are with ACC tournament here. Florida State and Cal ended up as the last two buys into the second round. They'll face off against each other on Wednesday. You do have Clemson as the 5 seed awaiting the winner of Virginia Tech, Wake Forest. And then you have NC State, the 7 seed, awaiting the winner of that Stanford Pitt game. And of course, SMU or Syracuse is going to face off against Louisville in the second round. So we'll break down some of the bracket at the end and kind of the path for some of these teams that need it most as well. But we await James Fletcher here on All Access AM in just a little bit, and he's going to join us. But let's look back on some of those games, as this weekend was so much fun. And look, we'll talk UNC Duke with James Fletcher and what that game meant, as Duke was able to get a double-digit win to close out their season. But I look at SMU's loss to Florida State and the inability for SMU to be competitive. This is, I believe, almost the third full game that SMU has not led at any moment in. And that is just for a team that you can see the flashes of moments where, man, they should be competitive in this game. They should be competitive in this setting. And they just haven't been over the last 4 games. If I'm an SMU fan and you're wondering if they're going to get in the NCAA tournament, look, a lot of bracketologists saying yes, but you look at the way SMU has lost these last 4 games, and outside of Cal, where you can just sit there and blame free throws, it's a really, really tough ask, I think, to think that this committee isn't going to really notice that. Yes, like the whole idea is that your captain blowout losses, don't kill you as much because of it's just 10 points or whatever in the overall kind of grand scheme of like how the whole rankings and some of the metrics that they use are come up with. But SMU's a different team without BJ Edwards. And that's the reality. And so as the committee evaluates SMU, I think it's intriguing. Let's say SMU wins this first game in the ACC tournament. They kind of settle down some of the instability there. Or maybe if they lose, like if they lose, I don't know. I think you could throw out the kind of bracketologists if they're keeping them in as the last 4 in. But there's also been a lot of teams falling off late in this season, as far as making that push to get to be an NCAA tournament team. So that's something to watch too. But SMU fell 91-78 to FSU. But man, I want to talk about FSU. The job that Luke Laux has done in his first season, the way his team plays for him is so impressive. Chauncey Wiggins had 31 points. He was 6 of 8 from beyond the arc. SMU continued to give up 3-pointers after 3-pointers in this game. Once it got going, early on, it looked like, okay, SMU is playing some defense today. Florida State was, they started the game off with a 3, but then they were like 4 of 13 or something like that. It wasn't really that impressive. And then late in the first half, they picked it up, and all of a sudden, they hang 45 on SMU in the first half, and then just kept rolling in the second, with 46. SMU's offense, I think, has just been incredibly disappointing down the stretch. I mean, for Jaron Pierre Jr. to go out there and just have 7 points, to have the number of turnovers that he did, he almost had more turnovers than points. You need your best players this time of year to step up, and he was a non-factor. And for the amount of money he's getting paid, and that reality that we all live in now, that's got to be a game that you look back on and you're wondering, okay, how are you going to bounce back in ACC tournament and show, who you are and really step up to the plate for your team that's missing BJ Edwards. So, but FSU, they had 4 of their 5 starters in double figures. Robert McRae, the 5th, just an unreal player. I love watching him play. High flying, got length, just a fun guard to watch play. And he's really stepped up with about 16 points a game for this Seminoles team this season. He's done a little bit of everything. I mean, I would take him every day of the week if you're kind of starting to build a team, and maybe you're allowed a certain amount of money or whatever to build it. I might say, hey, for my bang for my buck, I'm going to go with Robert McRae. He's just awesome. 6'10" from the field. He added 12 assists on the day, and FSU had 19 assists on 30 baskets. So a really impressive day for them in that respect. And so I think FSU has to be feeling good about where they've finished off their season in the regular season, 17-14 overall. They're 10-8 in ACC play. They get a bye into the second round, and who would have thought that, leaving non-conference play? And so credit to that staff for turning things around and putting them in the right direction. Just an awesome job by them. Funny enough, in Earl Grant's last game, Boston College hosts Notre Dame and beats the Irish 77-69. Fred Payne had 24 points in this one, and he continues to be one of the top, I think, players in this conference. Just happens to be at a team that now sits at 11-20 overall, 4-14 in the ACC. Notre Dame 13-18, 4-14 in ACC play. Jalen Harrelson had 21 points on the day, but Fred Payne, I mean, 7 of 20, not a great line, but was able to get to the free throw line enough to also make a positive impact in that respect. And Chase Forte and Bowden Kapke had double digits as well as far as the starters go for BC. Louisville beats Miami on senior day, 92-89. So Miami kind of gets, knocked down just a peg in a sense as far as confidence goes going into the ACC tournament, but a really good basketball game there. We'll get into that with James Fletcher, kind of what he saw and where that game, if anything, the impact on standings go and things like that for seeding. Stanford has made a late push, beating NC State 85-84 on Saturday as senior day unfolded there in Raleigh. Cal fell at Wake Forest 80-73. Wake gets a nice win to close out the regular season as Steve Forbes, heads into the offseason with a lot of work to do. And then Pitt 71-69 over Syracuse. That could be a battle of two teams that are sitting there maybe making coaching changes after this. We're keeping a close eye on what Pitt does with Jeff Capel and with what Syracuse is going to do with Adrian Autry. Maybe we see more news of that, but both teams are playing in the ACC tournament, so I'm fascinated to see if they do exit after these first round matchups, if they make a move right after that. So going to be really interesting to watch that and what those programs opt to do in that respect. But we're going to get to James Fletcher in just a moment, but do want to remind you guys as well about our friends at Sportsmo. Sportsmo continues to bring it for college basketball fans who are looking to help their teams become the best they can be. You can make micro donations. You pledge certain amount for a certain amount of 3-pointers or a win or whatever the options are on the Sportsmo app. And now you can go head to head against your friends and bet them about how your team is going to do versus their team. And guess what? Then you can impact your own school's student athlete benefit fund. So huge opportunity for you in conference week and March Madness to make those bets, make those donations, and check out all the things that Sportsmo has to offer and how you can help your favorite college basketball team or, plan ahead for football season. You can help them actually improve by funding their program with these micro donations. So check out our friends at Sportsmo with the Sportsmo app today.
College basketball hits different with Sportsmo. You tap, they score. You pledge, they drop a 3. You give as a group, they win as a team. At this point, you're not watching a game, you're in it. Download the app, fund your wallet, and get in the game. Download Sportsmo. Power the play.
Now we're proud to be powered, of course, by James Fletcher, giving us all the juice on bracketology in the NCAA tournament. James, that final weekend of the regular season, is it just a game of giveaway? Nobody wants to get into the tournament. All these teams that are on the bubble just dropping games left and right.
Yeah, that's sure how it feels. I think just about everyone on the bubble took a loss, particularly on Saturday. Every team that was kind of in that bubble conversation lost their matchup. And even on Friday, we saw a couple of teams finish out their regular season with some other losses. It's really just kind of wide open at this point. It's how bad of a loss did you take was really the only thing that was going to impact where you slotted come bracketology update to start this week. And now we go into conference tournament action, and you never want to leave yourself more to do in the conference tournament, but that's where a lot of teams now find themselves as a result of that final weekend.
What was the team or two that really stood out that missed the opportunity to make a move?
I think that you look at the teams that really missed out the most, and I think you look at an SMU, a UCF, even as you look at the Indianas that are a little bit further down, but in that last 4 in, because with everyone else taking losses, you could have really solidified your spot and made this a race for 1 or maybe 2 spots in the field. Instead, we're looking at this field and saying there could be 3, maybe 4 of those spots all up for grabs here in conference tournament action. It all is going to depend on how deep these teams make runs into the tournament. And that, of course, is before we have any bid stealers. There's already a couple peeking out there that look like they could make a run, could make things interesting and really shake this up. Because the way things stand right now, you cut one more spot off of this bubble, and it gets really tight for some of these teams that really would have thought they were safe just a week ago.
Let's go to SMU. 4 straight losses to end the regular season. They sit now playing in a first-round game in the ACC tournament. They lost BJ Edwards, a huge piece to their backcourt, apparently the glue guy for their entire offensive scheme at this point. How does the committee look at SMU if they're in that room and they're saying, okay, well, BJ Edwards, it seems like he's not out for the season, at least from what SMU is saying, but they've been such a drastically different team down the stretch. And they also, this is before they get a chance to play in the ACC tournament too.
Yeah, I think that that's going to be the biggest discussion is how much do we weigh this BJ Edwards injury? Can we kind of elevate them back up to closer where their status was when he was healthy? Because if he comes back for the NCAA tournament, he looks good. If he looks good in the ACC tournament, if he's able to compete at some point during that process, these are things that would elevate them a little bit more. But we've just seen the numbers dip and dip and dip with this losing streak, to where now I think that they're in the bubble conversation kind of regardless of how you land on that injury. But of course it's going to benefit them if someone in that room does stand up and say, look, this team looked like they were firmly in when they had BJ Edwards. If we think that he's going to be healthy for the NCAA tournament, I think that they deserve a spot in the field. I think that's really where they stand right now, likely to be in the field. But because of this 4-game losing streak, you also leave yourself at risk of somebody else standing up in that room and saying, do we really want to put a team into the NCAA tournament who's lost 4 straight, especially if it runs to 5 in this ACC tournament? You really leave yourself where somebody's going to make the argument that you're just not one of the hottest teams in the country, and therefore they shouldn't spend a spot on you.
And you currently have them as last 4 in. Would a loss in the first round of the ACC tournament move them out, or is that still something where you got to look at all the other teams, see what they do, and see some of those, or just off of face value, losing the last 5 games of the regular season and into that ACC tournament, is that enough?
I do think that they would still be in the field with a loss in the first round, but the caveat there is that we don't know how many bid stealers there's going to be. First of all, that can of course shake things up out of the A10, where St. Louis is already in the field, in the Mountain West, where Utah State already has a spot locked up inside the field, and also the Miami, Ohio situation. They are in the field now with an undefeated regular season. They are going to get one of these spots, whether it's in the last 4 in or above that on the 11 seed line up into the 10 seed conversation. So those are 3 conferences that could produce bid stealers. As you look at where I have SMU currently on the bracket, they're 3rd from the bottom there. So if all 3 of those went the wrong way, you would really be sweating things out for that final spot. You also have the risk of one of these other teams making a deep run. Say an Indiana or an Auburn made a run to the championship of their conference tournament. Well, yes, that would be adding substantial amounts of data to their resume that would probably be enough to elevate them past an SMU that took a loss early in that conference tournament. So they are firmly in for now, but there are situations that are out there that could end up with them on the wrong side of the bubble. And so, yeah, they're going to have to sweat this one out.
And a team that kind of similar to SMU, a team like NC State has tumbled as well, and losing that one to Stanford on Saturday was kind of the not the last straw or anything like that, but man, what a tumble for NC State down the stretch. I mean, I don't think anybody really saw that coming in a sense. You thought, okay, maybe some volatility with that team like it's been all season, but man, another ACC team really stumbling down the stretch.
Yeah, they've dropped themselves into the last 4 buys at this point. I do think that they're firmly in the field. They're safely in. There's really no situation that could happen in conference tournament play that would drop them out of the field. But like I said, with 3 potential bid stealers out there, they could drop into a situation where they have to play one of those first 4 games. I don't think that's likely. I think that they've got enough cushion that they're probably going to be safely in the field, probably as a 10 seed. That'd be the most likely scenario. You could see them drop into that last 11 seed spot, depending on, like I said, where people fall on the bracket. But yeah, it's been a rough close to the season, a team that's had a lot of volatility. I think early on when we saw the volatility, it was kind of the idea, could they get things facing the right direction in time? That was going to be the debate. Well, then they got things headed the right direction, and they've kind of turned the wrong way. Now they're taking more losses, something that I don't think many people saw coming from this team. But we'll see if they can kind of flip things around. It really just takes 1, maybe 2 wins in the ACC tournament for them to jump back up another seed line and really feel a lot better heading into the NCAA tournament.
And a team like Virginia Tech, I mean, still kind of sweating it out. Another team that, you start stacking up some wins in this conference tournament, and their path, when you look at it, they get Wake Forest. They then would play Clemson. If they can knock off Clemson, then they face North Carolina, who's without Caleb Wilson. I mean, there's a path, at least, for them to be playing Duke in the semifinals come Friday. And that's a pretty good situation. Like, I mean, you look at the draw. If you're going to play a first-round game, I think Virginia Tech's got the best draw in a sense, like relative to what damage they could do. Because I even look at, Stanford Pitt. That's a tall order, even though NC State just lost to Stanford. Then you got to play Virginia. I just look at what the path is for Virginia Tech. They have an opportunity to make some noise here down the stretch.
They definitely do have a path into the NCAA tournament, which is really interesting. Early on Saturday, after they took that loss against Virginia, it really looked like, as you looked at the board, there was almost no chance. There was no path left for them to really make a run. And then teams kept taking losses. And everyone around them continued to lose. And by the time it was all said and done on Sunday morning, when the analytics all reset and we had the fresh data, they had actually moved up the board. And so they are in a position now where they can capitalize on that. Like you said, a pretty favorable path through the ACC tournament. I do think it's going to take a deep run into the ACC tournament to really put themselves into a deep conversation for one of those final spots, just because, like I said, I would expect at least one bid stealer to likely come out of all this chaos that we're going to get in the next week. And if that's the case, you're talking about not only having to jump 3-4 teams in the bubble conversation, but also 1 or 2 more who right now we think of a little bit more firmly in the field.
And let's go to the Louisville-Miami game from Saturday. Louisville goes on the road, gets a win over Miami. You have them kind of interestingly enough, Louisville 6 seed, Miami the 7 in the NCAA tournament right now. And these are 2 teams that, again, Miami's been one of the bells of the ball of ACC play this year with the resurgence under Jay Lucas, leading that team in his first year. Louisville's been kind of all over the place. Michael Brown's injured, all sorts of things going on around their program. What did that game mean for those 2 programs as far as seeding in the NCAA tournament, and then what that kind of leads into for ACC championship week?
Yeah, it was definitely an important one for seeding, because Louisville is not only in that 6 seed conversation just above where Miami sits, but they're also right on the cusp of the 5 seed conversation. And North Carolina is currently that team that's 1 slot above them. I have Louisville as the top 6 seed, North Carolina as the last in the 5 seed column. And so that could flip at any second the way that things are going. We know that North Carolina is without Caleb Wilson. How does that impact them? How does that change their seeding? Does that impact them in their ability to go deep into the ACC tournament? That could, of course, flip things as well. So Louisville keeps themselves right in the hunt with this win to jump onto that 5 seed line and get closer and closer to favorable seeding in the bracket come Selection Sunday. And then on the other side with Miami, I don't think they really lost much ground with that loss, but it did kind of miss an opportunity where they could have gone onto the 6 seed line and given themselves some more upward mobility as they entered conference tournament action.
And Virginia getting that win over Virginia Tech, what did that mean for them? I mean, obviously a bubble team, the committee loves to see things like that happen for teams that are trying to improve their seeding. But what's your take on Virginia's seeding heading into this week in the ACC tournament, with really not a ton of opportunities to kind of help themselves in a sense, with them being already into the quarterfinals?
It was big for them in trying to maintain a spot in that top 16. I think with a loss, they were for sure going to land on that 5 seed line. And you've got Arkansas, who's kind of in pursuit of this. Vanderbilt has kind of ticked themselves back up into this conversation. They're knocking on the door of a 4 seed bid. So for Virginia to get that win, And also later on that night, you saw Texas Tech take a loss. Now they've got a little bit of cushion. They're now 15th on the overall seed line. And so you've got a team behind you as those two teams from the SEC are kind of moving forward. There's one more spot between you and a drop to that 5 seed line. So yeah, it was important for them. And then just to get from 16 to 15 is also a big jump in the seed line. I know that it doesn't seem like a massive leap, but when we look at the locations for the NCAA tournament, where these teams are going to be headed, it will be impactful because of the location that you're going to be facing. It's very likely because of those 8 spots available that the 16th overall seed is going to go to Portland, where the 15th could end up either a San Diego, potentially somewhere much closer that would be closer to the East Coast. You could get a Tampa in that mix if you're a 4 seed. It really comes down to what all is left available. Philadelphia could even be one that's in the mix. That would, of course, be one of the most favorable to Virginia. And so it would be really big for them to be in that 14 or 15 spot rather than being in that 16th spot where you're going to have to head all the way to Portland to play your first round game.
UNC Duke, that kind of dinner time matchup that we saw on Saturday, is the Blue Devils pulled away from UNC, winning 76-61. This Duke team, just the way they've been able to play pretty much all season, has been so impressive. They're locked in as a 1 seed. Are they the number 1 overall seed? Can they be the number 1 overall seed with a loss in the ACC tournament? What's your thought there?
I think that we're really shaping up for a fascinating race for the number 1 overall seed here, because if Duke wins out, if they win the ACC tournament, it's theirs. There's not going to be any question. But if they take a loss, that opens the door for Michigan. If Michigan takes a loss, that opens the door for Arizona. I think that all 3 of them are still close enough that we're probably going to give the nod to whoever is a conference champion of that group in the order that we have them. So if Duke were to lose in the ACC tournament, Michigan goes on to win, and Arizona, I think that you're going to see Michigan, Arizona, and Duke. If you go any other order there, just how they are now, and then take out the team that took a loss and move them to 3rd. That's really how I see it shaping up. I don't see any of them falling beyond that 3rd spot. But yes, it's going to be a real race to the finish line here. Duke has pole position, and so if they can run undefeated through the rest of this, they are going to get the number 1 overall spot. But I will add, it's obviously for bragging rights. This is a big deal, being the number 1 overall seed. We always kind of remember who was that first team to pop up in the bracket. All of these teams are going to get their preferred region. All of these teams are going to go to their preferred first weekend site. So nobody's really competing for anything in terms of where they will be going. It's just how we talk about them as we enter the tournament.
And North Carolina, gets the bad news. I mean, Caleb Wilson breaks his, thumb or finger or whatever, dunking with the other hand in practice, trying to get back into, the lineup at some point for this UNC team. He's out for the rest of the season, a huge blow. You had them as the 5 seed. Could they end up falling if they lose in the first round, or not the first round, but their first matchup in the ACC tournament? Because it seems like obviously they're a little bit different without Caleb Wilson, despite just how well they've played as a whole without him still.
They definitely can take a fall. Like I said earlier, Louisville is right on their tail. I think at this point you could have them in either order. You could move Louisville ahead of them right now, particularly with the Caleb Wilson injury. I think that's going to be a debate inside of that room. And so if they aren't able to go as deep or further than Louisville in this tournament, it's going to leave a lot of questions. It's going to force that committee to have an in-depth conversation about those 2 teams and the teams that are around them as well, how they do over the next week. But they are at risk of falling. I don't think that they have enough upward momentum. If they had gotten that Duke win, they could have, but they're not going to be able to reach up into that 4 seed conversation now. I think that they're in the 5 or 6 seed realm, depending on how things fall over this next week. With or without Caleb Wilson, I think that's probably where they were likely to land anyways, but I think they would have had a lot more cushion to stay on the 5 seed line with him there. Being able to have this now conversation, are they the same team, is going to be more fascinating to kind of track and follow, even though they have a good record while he hasn't been out there.
Let's close out with this. Put into perspective this Duke team on what you've, and so many of us just keep track of Duke and obviously one of the names in college basketball. Put into perspective this Duke team relative to some of the other great ones, kind of where they're trending going into the NCAA tournament. And, Cam Boozer playing like the National Player of the Year as well, just a player that continues to dominate and play at a high level.
Yeah, this Duke team is right up there with some of the best. We know about Cameron Boozer, where he ranks. I mean, he's up there with the Zion Williamsons for some of the best seasons in college basketball history. As we look at the analytics, he leads the country in so many key statistics, and the ones that he doesn't lead the country, he leads the ACC in them. So he has done incredible things. He has really led this team. We've seen the defense of Dame Sarr, the offense of Isaiah Evans have kind of complemented what they've done. They've got a great 8-man rotation. That's what you need in postseason play. The big concern for them right now is that injuries have started to infiltrate. And we've seen some of the best seasons in this program's history, at least recent history, be derailed by little nagging injuries or a key role player going down before. And so to see Caleb Foster out, to see Pat Ngongba out, it's going to have fans kind of on the edge of their seat, not just in this ACC tournament where John Shire has already said he doesn't expect to see those two play, but entering the NCAA tournament. Can they get those guys back healthy? Because they are both really key pieces in what Duke does. Cameron Boozer, as good as his defensive metrics are, he does rely on having rim protection behind him. And Malik Brown can provide some of that, but with Ngongba, it is just a little bit different of a scheme that you're able to run. And so I think it's going to be important to have both of those center options behind Cam Boozer as we reach more advanced stages against better and better teams. And then for Caleb Foster, a veteran point guard, a guy who's going to kind of organize things, keep things under control. You're probably turning over to Caden Boozer those duties for the next couple of weeks or however long it takes for Foster to come back. That's a freshman that you trust, yes, but still a freshman rather than a more veteran, experienced guy who's been in these types of situations before. So you would hate to see it come down to guys who are out, but this Duke team is trending in terms of what their season has been so far as one of the best that we've seen in recent memory.
James Fletcher, we appreciate all the time as always. Enjoy championship week. I know it'll be a crazy one, but we're looking forward to catching up with you after Selection Sunday too, as we finally get the answers to the bracketology questions.
Yeah, for sure. That's always the fun time, breaking down what you got right, what you got wrong in the eyes of the committee.
Cool. James Fletcher, we appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on with us on All Access AM. And there he goes, having our back on the bracketology discussion here on All Access AM. So appreciate James Fletcher. Quick note before we get you guys out the door, Miami football made a new coaching hire, adding their tight ends coach for this season. They go over to Army and they go get Mike Vitti, the tight ends coach from the Black Knights. He spent almost a decade with a decade up there at West Point and was the associate head coach and offensive line coach. Well, guess what? Now coming over to coach at Miami as the tight ends coach, a really, really incredible hire here, a Bronze Star medal winner or medal recipient in the military. He was a platoon leader in Afghanistan. Just what a story, first of all, and appreciate his service to our country, but now heads to Miami to coach tight ends. And for a program in Army that is just built on toughness and perseverance and so many different pillars that you want in a football team, Mario Cristobal makes this hire. And it's so intriguing because he can bring an innovative approach to Miami's run game, maybe helping Shannon Dawson develop different ways to get the football to a Mark Fletcher and kind of find different ways with a new look offensive line this coming season to make all of that work. So he'll work closely with Alex Maribel, one of the best offensive line coaches in the country. And of course, Mario Cristobal heads up, a lot of the offensive line discussion with his, Miami program and just kind of the emphasis on that. So Miami makes a really strong hire there. I think just the more you hear about his background, the more you're impressed. So Miami continues to do things at a high level, and that'll be a key hire for the Hurricanes as they head into the 2026 season as spring ball is upon us across the country. So with that, hope you guys enjoyed this edition of All Access AM. Appreciate Joe Tipton and James Fletcher for joining us. And we appreciate our sponsors as well. Security National Bank, Sportsmo, Corporate Magic. We appreciate them. Make sure you guys check them out and see what they're all about in our podcast episode description channel and get more information on them. So appreciate all of you guys for watching All Access AM on this Monday. We'll see you Wednesday morning, and we'll have some ACC basketball to talk about as the tournament gets underway in Charlotte. So see you guys at 8 a.m. Central Time Wednesday morning, and we'll catch you next time on All Access AM.